Hey, it's Kate Stillman with Yoga Healer, and I'm doing this series to help people who have allergies or asthma or autoimmune conditions or weight creep understand what all these conditions have in common. And what we're talking about today is asthma. So like what's going on with asthma? If you have asthma or if you know of anyone with asthma, I hope you share this, because I find that often what happens in modern culture is that we get a diagnosis, we get a scary diagnosis like asthma, and then we get medication for that, which is, it's chemical medication in general. It's created created by chemistry in a lab. And the issue is that if we don't understand the underlying cause, we never get to the root of the problem of what is causing allergies or what is causing asthma or what is causing the autoimmune condition. If we don't get to or what is causing weight creep even, so if we don't get to the root of the issue, then what happens is that issues stack on top of each other. Now, asthma is more, it's common with kids. It's common with kids doing sports. It's on the rise. So what I'm going to do is share a few slides, and we'll cruise through this and give you a sense of like what's really the opportunity as far as you and anyone you know that has allergies or has asthma. So I want to start with this picture of the lungs here, that it's good to actually just take a moment and get in touch with your own lungs and your own breath body. So if you're, whether you're listening to this while you're driving or you're watching from a seated position or you're on a walk, just take a moment and take a deeper breath in. And feel how your lungs expand. Feel how you have this capacity to expand and to aerate and fluff these little pockets within you. And then as you exhale, just kind of release and let go. Okay, so we're in the lungs. So what we want to understand about asthma, and we're talking about asthma today, what we want to understand is that asthma is considered type 2 inflammation. So type 1 inflammation is acute inflammation. It's where we have an acute inflammatory response to something. Type 2 inflammation, is where we have overactive immune response, but it's chronic. It's not something that just happens now and then. The immune system is under a chronic response, and it's chronically overactive, and that can contribute to the symptoms of asthma. I would say that's actually the underlying cause. So asthma is a chronic inflammatory disease of the airways characterized by the presence of an array of activated inflammatory cells and their mediators. So anything that's mediating the immune response, we need to start to associate, that's what asthma is. Asthma is a chronic inflammatory disease. And I know for those of you who've been following me for a while and who've been listening to the podcast for a while at Yoga Healer, thank you. Thank you for being awesome listeners. And I know you might be like, Kate, why is it that no matter what you're talking about, it seems to come down to chronic inflammation? And that's really what, unfortunately, we need to talk about that today. But I do want to talk more specifically to asthma. I want to do some breathing practices today so that anyone that has asthma can actually not just work on intermittent fasting and not just work on allowing deeper hydration of their physiology and rest time and apoptosis. And we'll get into that too, but can actually work on strengthening your connection with your lungs. I know with asthma in particular, because the inflammatory response is so scary. It's so scary to feel like you can't breathe. It's so awful to feel like you can't breathe, that what we want to do is reestablish connection with physiology, trust with our ability to breathe, that the world is safe, that for those of you who have allergy-related asthma, that the world is safe, that the trees and the pollen and the dogs and the dust aren't out to get you, but that you're A-okay as you are, and the world's A-okay as it is. Unfortunately, inflammatory responses, anything that is chronic inflammation now can also be triggered by emotional inflammation. So just being super stressed out, feeling like you're unsupported, feeling anxious, feeling depressed, which, post-COVID, the stats on that are horrible. People feel really insecure, deep down existential anxiety all the time, deep down, even if it's just running 24/7 in the background, that is all contributing to chronic inflammation. So emotional inflammation equals chronic inflammation. It goes physiological. The emotional goes physiological. Anyone here who's into Ayurveda and yoga and has been for a while, you're like, yes, we've known this for thousands of years. It's cool that we now have the science. It's cool that we now have the science to back it up. Sorry, I don't have great lighting right now. Okay, so asthma is what? It's a chronic inflammatory disease. It's a disease of chronic inflammation. And that's the number. If you're trying to uproot allergies, if you're trying to uproot asthma, whether it's exercise-induced asthma or allergy-induced asthma, what you want to know is the asthma is a symptom of a root cause of chronic inflammation. Part of the problem with the Western medical model right now is when you have asthma, it's super scary because you can't breathe. Or when your child has it, it's super scary because they can't breathe and you go into panic. So you're actually elevating the emotional inflammation. So overall, the physiology gets increasingly triggered into a sympathetic nervous system response. So the nerves get even more jacked. In Ayurveda, we would say, well, this is a vata. This is actually now going into a vata imbalance because we're at the level of anxiety, we're at the level of the nervous system. Okay, so again, asthma is a chronic inflammatory disease. I'm trying to rewrite our program here, thinking asthma is something separate than chronic inflammation. And what happens is that the pathways, right, are actually getting remodeled. And this is, I think, a really important thing to understand, that asthmatic airways are also characterized by remodeling, a term used to define complex morphologic changes involving all the structures of the bronchial wall. So take a deep breath into your lungs. And you want to feel like there's these little, there's broccoli florets, right, that are just expanding and growing like trees, growing their little leaves in spring, like popping out these little leaves in spring. And you're aerating and creating this flexibility within your lung tissue, within the little bronchioles. Now, as you exhale, let those slowly contract. So we want to actually exercise our lungs. When we're exercising, we want to exercise our lungs and we want to exercise our diaphragm. And this is going to relax the nervous system from a sympathetic response into a parasympathetic response. Now, there's a really easy way to do this. We're going to do this with pursed lip breathing. So what you're going to do is imagine you're sucking on a straw. Those of you who used to smoke cigarettes or joints, you might be like, oh, that feels the same way. So what you're going to do is, if you're sitting, put your feet flat on the floor, lift the roof of your mouth so your spine is long. You can, if you want, put your tongue, tip of your tongue on the roof of your mouth, and that helps actually create a lengthening through your neck, through the crown of your head. And now as you exhale, just kind of let go any tension without losing the height of your spine. And then as you inhale, purse your lips again, like you're sucking the straw, and slowly inhale through your pursed lips. So this is a mouth breathing exercise. You're not breathing through your nose. You're breathing through your lips. And then as you inhale, you might notice that it takes longer and you're going more slowly. And this is one of the ways you're creating a little bit of positive stress in those little bronchioles. Now, as you exhale, try to exhale twice as much as you inhaled. So try to lengthen the exhale even more, even though the inhale was slow. Twice as long, moving the breath out through your lips. At the bottom of the exhalation, you can pause and then slowly inhale again. So the lips are staying pursed like you're sucking through a straw. When you get to the top of the inhale, exhale twice as much as you inhaled. And you'll notice the stress is out. There's this muscle that's right beneath your lungs, and that's the diaphragm. And you want to squeeze on the diaphragm. to exhale even more out of your lungs. You're strengthening the diaphragm muscle. We're going to do this one more time. This is sipping through a straw breath or pursed lip breath. And you're slowly inhaling through the straw. So slowly exhaling through the straw. And then notice as you end, just notice, can you just relax and feel as if you have more awareness in your lungs? So bringing this awareness into your lungs and relaxing. And that's a really simple way to reverse this chronic inflammatory response. So again, if what's happening, if what asthma is type 2 inflammation, and it's directly related to the lung tissue, it's directly related to underuse of the lungs and the diaphragm muscles, right? We want to increase awareness into the lungs. And then, so you can see on this slide, there's like one half of the lungs is pictured as broccoli florets, because when you're breathing in that way and you're doing that pursed lip breathing, you're oxygenating those little teeny tiny bronchioles. And on the other side of the slide is like these cigarettes and these like totally shriveled up. Like that's what happens even if we're just not, when we're exercising, if we're not concentrating on moving more energy through the lungs and putting some positive stress on that diaphragm muscle. Okay, so again, what we've gone through here is that there's an asthma, chronic inflammation, and second, that when we have asthma, that what's happening is this chronic inflammation is actually changing the structure in the lungs, in the bronchial walls. And as that structure changes, it creates a fibrosis, or it becomes more fibrous, it becomes more hardened. It actually gets dried out. So in Ayurveda, we would say, well, there's a vata imbalance with the hardness, there's a pitta imbalance with the inflammation, and there's a kapha imbalance with the actual fibers, because kapha is actually the matter. It becomes fibered or hard. And then it's harder and harder to actually get really good oxygenation and blood flow. Now, another surprising thing, what we learned when we study asthma from an inflammatory imbalance, is we actually see that the lung tissue, the cells, that the lung tissues become dysbiotic, meaning there's a microbiome in the lungs. So you have a lot of different microbiomes. A lot of people now are like, oh yeah, microbiomes in my skin, or microbiomes in my gut, or microbiomes in my colon. Yeah, it's also in your mouth. It's also in your sinuses, your parasinuses, your nostrils, this whole part of your breathing apparatus. And it's also in your lungs. So what does this mean? This means that eubiotic or positive or collaborative, I like that word, bacteria and viruses and archaea and fungi are there for functionality of your lung tissue. They're not human DNA cells, they're bacterial and viral cells. And when they're happy, when the microbiome of your lungs is happy and healthy, you're not in inflammation. They actually eat the inflammation. The microbes actually eat, the viruses actually eat the inflammation. Yay, eubiotic microbiome. But fibrosis, when we have asthma, we have fibrosis. We have these at the micro level, we have morphologic changes. So the morphogenesis, it actually morphs, it changes into this hardened, fibrous, dysbiotic microbiome. So what happens then is the viruses and the bacteria and the archaea that are living within the lung tissue, that those are actually the ones that are anaerobic. They don't need oxygen. They actually will grow their own structures that block the flow of oxygen into your blood. Now, the healthy microbiome in the lungs, and when you do breathing exercises and when you use intermittent fasting, and if you take my allergy relief workshop, it works exactly the same for allergies as it does for asthma. So I just wanted to tell you guys about that, because we actually have this great deal. I'll put this in the chat on Facebook. We have this sweet deal right now where it's like, you get like 90% off this, and you'll start to really understand exactly what is going on with the inflammatory response. Why is the physiology reactive rather than proactive? Okay, so intermittent fasting has a lot to do with lowering your overall allostatic load, which is going to make the microbiome healthy again. It's really fascinating. The microbiome thrives, the eubiotic microbiome, meaning the good guys, that which is cooperative with your physiology, thrives with intermittent fasting, thrives with any of the positive stressors. Now, we just did a positive stressor exercise with pursed lip breathing, where you're like, it's a little bit hard. Yeah. Fasting longer is a little bit hard. Positive stressors reverse chronic inflammation. I'm looking for my positive stressor slide. Hold on. Positive stressors, right? They actually are like these little things that you do when you hang out with people who do hard things regularly. That's what this slide is showing. What happens is you positively stress your physiology. When you hang out with people that are snacking or overeating or eating convenience food, like there's cookies at work and you just grab a cookie, when you watch the news and it's like totally stressful, all of that is a negative stressor. All of that actually is going to aggravate asthma. It's all going to increase chronic inflammation. When we sacrifice sleep, what does Netflix say? Their biggest competitor isn't like Paramount Films. Like their biggest competitor isn't shopping on Amazon. For Netflix, their biggest competitor is sleep, right? When we sacrifice that which is healthy, that which is positively stressing our system, when we do the easy things that make life harder in the long run, that increases chronic inflammation. One way that we would say is that increases the allostatic load. Allostatic load means that other than that which is the dysbiotic microbiome, gets stronger. The fibrosis in the lungs gets harder. The diaphragm muscle gets weaker. And our lungs look more like the dried out cigarette, the cigarette side of this broccoli lung image, than like the healthy broccolis as like little trees. Okay, so to digest all the stuff I just said, we're going to do another breathing exercise to strengthen your lungs. So again, take either your seat or stand, or you can do this walking. I often do breathing exercises while I'm walking slowly. I'm not walking like super fast. I'm just walking and focusing on the breath. So no matter where you're doing this, you can even do this in your car, but keep your hands on the wheel. Everyone else can do this and take your hands and stack them on your lower belly, lower lungs. And what we're going to do is a 3-part inhale. So you can slowly inhale into where your lower hand is and pause. Don't exhale. Then inhale into where your second hand is, stacked on top of your lower hand, and pause. And you're stressing out the little broccoli florets of your lungs. Then top part of your lungs, inhale more around your chest, upper chest, and pause. And then as you exhale, you can just release through your mouth. And then pause. And then do it again. So you're stretching on the inhale. So bottom hand part first, pause without exhaling. Second hand, breathe into there, pause. And then upper chest. And if those of you who've been doing pranayama for a while, you probably don't have asthma, you're probably watching for other people that have asthma, just know that like people who've been smoking a lot, like these are really, you have to start super gentle. You never stress out in pranayama or breathing exercises. Once you get to the top and you can't handle it anymore, then exhale and let it all go. Squeeze on the diaphragm, push all the air out of the lungs. We'll do 2 more rounds, slowly inhaling. If you can, inhale if your nostrils are open, inhale through your nostrils, into your sinuses, to the lower hand, and pause. Into the second hand, and pause, and into your upper chest, even below the collarbones. No tension in the face, no tension in the eyes. This is exercising your lungs, not your sense organs. as full as you can be. Pause for until you can't hold it, and then exhale it all. Put a squeeze on the diaphragm. So you're pausing at the bottom of the exhale. This is called the kumbhaka. It's the space between the inhale and exhale, space between the exhale and inhale. And you're finding that quiet space before the final round. Final round. Inhale to the lower belly, lower hand. And pause. Inhale to the hand stacked on that, third chakra hand. And pause. And then inhale into the fourth chakra, heart center. Expanding through the back of your lungs, the sides of your armpits, side bodies, up through the collarbones, back of the shoulders, top of the throat. And pause. And then as you exhale, once you can't handle the holding of the inhale, then exhale all at once. Empty it all out. Put a squeeze on the diaphragm. Like, where's my diaphragm? Yeah, find that. It's a muscle. It should be the strongest muscle, stronger than your heart. Put a squeeze on that. And then when you can't handle it anymore, relax. Let the natural breath in. And just notice how you feel. What does it feel like inside? Does it feel more light? Does it feel more spacious? Does it feel more free? Can you feel more oxygen circulating in your lungs? Does your mouth feel moist? And your hands feel warm? That's one of the signs that you've done breathing exercises. All right, so a few more things. Type 2 inflammation. So again, asthma, we're talking here. Asthma, we're also talking allergies. We're also talking autoimmune. It's all type 2 inflammation. And specifically, the inflammatory pathway is at the root of many of the changes that occur inside the lungs of someone with moderate to severe asthma, including mucus production, airway obstruction, and hyper responsiveness to allergens. So the reason the physiology becomes hyper responsive, think of a kid that's hyper. That's often where we first use that word hyper. It's like they're kind of going crazy. They've clearly had some sugar or caffeine, right? Like kids, they're literally vibrating at an unsustainable speed. And what you do with type 2 inflammation is you get to the root cause of that, and you allow the system to go from hyper and sympathetic to chill, to relaxed. But to get the system to relax, you have to do the hard things. You have to do the little hard things, the positive stressors. So we also have an intermittent fasting course. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, or you're watching this on YouTube or in our Facebook chat, and you want access, you want a discount on our intermittent fasting course, just type fasting in the chat or the comments, or send an email to help@yogahealer.com and put in the word fasting, and we'll send you a good deal on our intermittent fasting course. Intermittent fasting is one of the easiest ways to start to reverse type 2 inflammation, which is chronic, long-term, slow accumulation of inflammation. Now, some of us are thinking, but wait, my kid doesn't have inflammation, they have asthma. And the deal is, actually, most kids are raised on snacking. Most kids are raised on convenience foods. Most kids are raised in an environment today that, they just lived through COVID. It's been stressful. There's a vibration of stress. Most kids today, if we look statistically, how much kids are sleeping today versus 100 years ago? Well, most adults today are sleeping. If adults today get 8 hours sleep, that's considered a win. In 1900, adults were averaging 9 hours of sleep a night. And now 8 seems like it's maxing out. So we are sacrificing sleep even in our children. if we look at what's been on the rise with chronic inflammation in the last 100 years, because chronic inflammation didn't really exist 100 years ago in terms of chronic disease. Today, chronic inflammation is causing 3 out of 5 deaths in the worldwide. So 3 out of 5 people worldwide died of chronic inflammation from chronic inflammatory diseases. But that's not really, to me, like, it's not really the problem what you're going to die from. The problem is you're not living fully. And if you have allergies or you have asthma, overall, you're not feeling as good, right? Your health is getting a little bit worse every year. And that's at Yoga Healer, what we're really out here. We're 100%, I would say, out here to reverse. We're not here to cover issues like allergies and asthma with drugs, because drugs don't get to the root cause. Yes, they're super helpful in the short term. Yes, super helpful in the short term. They don't get to the root of the problem. And what we're really interested is getting to the root of the problem. So again, consumption of, like, our food has changed dramatically. Vegetable oil in the diet at all, sugar in the diet at all, wheat in the diet. That's not old grain wheat, right? That's not heirloom wheat, is going to contribute to chronic inflammation in the physiology. The data on all of that is in. So those of you who really want to understand the whole inflammatory response to the allergies and asthma, check out go to yogahealer.com/offer-allergy-relief and use the promo code relief, ! All capitals. Relief is spelled RELIEF ! And you can get an awesome deal on our allergy relief workshop. Okay, so just to review the little things that you can do daily. If you have a kid with asthma, a teenager with asthma, I would do this at breakfast before eating, 3 rounds of the breath. I would do this in the car, driving from school to sports. You're a parent like me, like, that's a common activity. Okay, we're gonna do 3 rounds of the breath. Before bed, 3 rounds of the breath. It's the frequency of shifting from shifting sympathetic to parasympathetic. It's the frequency from shifting out of the stress response. It's the frequency of the practice of any of the positive stressor habits, lengthening the fasting time between meals, even for children, no snacking between meals, no fruit drinks between meals. It's the frequency of the positive stressor habits that allows the physiology to eat the inflammation and to relax into a parasympathetic relaxer response. All right, so that's how we roll. I'll just show you one more slide about the immune reaction. On top, that's the acute allostasis. That's type 1 inflammation. That's not asthma. That's not allergies. That's not autoimmune disease. That's not weight creep. That's like super healthy person getting stung by a bee in the body creating a response to that. Okay, what most people have here, if you have allergies, if you have asthma, if you've got autoimmune, and we're doing next week autoimmune, and the week after on weight creep. What's weight creep? It's where you're gaining a couple pounds a year, right? It's where you need a bigger size pants than you used to need. That's called weight creep. That's also chronic inflammation. And I'll dial down more into those in the next 2. If you're listening on the podcast, those will be coming in the coming weeks. So tell your friends that have those issues. So I want to show you in chronic allostasis here. This is where you have chronic, a physiological shift to the body creating, and let me see if I can make this bigger so you can really see it. It's where you have modern chronic non-infectious response. It's called meta-inflammation when it happens over time. It's linked to weight gain. It's linked to obesity. It's actually super sadly, super sadly, let me go to one more slide here. I hate this information sometimes because it's lead to neurodysfunction or suboptimal cognitive function, which means that it's harder to learn. So it might seem like it's no big deal that we have stuff in our diets. It might seem no big deal that we just have asthma, we just use the inhaler, or the kid just uses the inhaler. But what we have to understand is chronic inflammation means that we don't learn as easily. We stop learning. Our brains actually don't function. Our brains over time are shrinking with inflammation. It's super sad. Our DNA doesn't function as designed, so we start to have impaired DNA. We have an inability to repair our DNA. So for me, the reason I'm doing this series The reason we're talking about asthma today is this stuff is super, super reversible. Now, if you can't breathe through your nostrils, this is a problem. We want you to be able to breathe through your nostrils. So using the neti pot, for those who have been involved with urine therapy with us, we have a free little P-book, because if you actually snort urine, it'll clear the ostia, which are blocking the ostia, these little, they're not in this image, but they're blocking the movement of the breath and the turbines into the parasinuses. So into the microbiome between the nostrils and the parasinuses. They're fueled by the turbines of the breath. We're not meant to breathe through our mouth. We're meant to spin breath through the turbines into the parasinuses, into the lungs. When that happens, our super awesome microbiome in our nostrils, and particularly in our sinuses, generates nitric oxide. The sinuses are in charge, it's an organ, and their number one function is to generate nitric oxide. When nitric oxide goes into the lungs expand. So you're looking at like the little broccoli florets, they get super big. They're able to actually vasodilate, get big, and bring oxygen into the bloodstream, right into the red blood cells. Super, super important. So if our nostrils are blocked, our lungs aren't going to function as well. If our nostrils are blocked, the parasinuses of the microbiome in the parasinuses is not alive and awake and functioning, which means the microbiome of the lungs isn't alive, awake, and functioning, which means, right, like, oh, fibrosis. Oh, my lungs are getting hard and fibrous. That's why when we talk about what's actually happening with asthma, that we have chronic inflammation and we have these morphologic changes involving all the structures of the bronchial wall. So sad, so reversible, so insanely reversible. All right, if you like this, you'll love the allergy relief workshop, and you'll love the intermittent fasting course where we can really help you absolutely get to the root cause of your asthma or your allergies. Kate Stillman, yogahealer.com, signing off. Next week, we go into autoimmune. Tell all your friends that have, I mean, there's what, 120 plus autoimmune diseases now, everything from MS to lupus to hypothyroid and hyperthyroidism to Epstein-Barr virus, and it goes on and on and on. We'll talk more about autoimmune next week. Namaste. Have a great day. Oh, wait, I'll check the form for questions. Sorry, my slides weren't working earlier. Yeah, okay. I see no questions. Awesome. Bye, guys.